Before we get started, I just want everyone to understand that this isn't a personal attack whatsoever. None of these videos are personal attacks. I don't know any of the candidates well enough to judge their character. All these videos are trying to do is respond and critique to everything that was said at the People's Forum with regards to Renters Together. With that being said, let's get into it. Well, obviously, I can't make a individual video for every single candidate. Simply not enough time, and I'm the only one a part of Renters Together who knows how to edit videos. Instead, for this video, I'm just going to try to combine the rest of the candidates into one video, which is what I should have done with Mata, Kaleb, and Win, because they're literally running together and running off the same things, and they said the same things. Now, here's the first three responses.
Next up is Aaron Estabrook.
So I have come to the housing solutions differently in the terms of suitability and affordability, but I think safety is always a component. And I hear where Renters Together is coming from, and the need to put inspections up front is your position, and I definitely respect that. I'm trying to get there potentially through other means of affordability and aligning this housing stock in our community, which is just inherently unsafe. It's in a larger scope. They're old homes that were chopped up and remade into student apartments, and to undo that is not going to be a successful operation through an inspection program. Now, an inspection program, once they're realigned or purposed back to workforce housing or what those options might be, is going to be a natural component of that in my mind. And also, you know, not to knock our risk reduction people. I think whenever they're utilized, it's been very effective. I manage some properties, and occasionally those residents will call city risk reduction to come and do an inspection, and they tell us, you know, this needs to be fixed in the next 10 to 14 days, and they come back and check on it, and, you know, we fix it. They get results. So I think that if anything that needs to be done from the landlord's perspective. So I don't support at this point, but maybe in the future.
Thank you, Aaron. Next up is Usha Reddi.
Thank you. What we have right now, as was mentioned, is a rental registration program, and I'm not sure it's working as we wanted it to be. I tried to get on the map today to see where all the rental registrations are, and it wasn't up, it wasn't working. So I don't even know how many registrations are registered in our community, so that's a problem. So I do think there's lots of room for improvement, and even if your rental property is registered, you know, it says on our website, it says it's important to note that the registration of a rental dwelling does not indicate that it meets all requirements of the city of Manhattan. So that's a problem. So just knowing there's a rental property is not enough. We don't know what's going on. And even though we put youngsters such as yourself trying to make a complaint, you know, you're worried about retaliation or not knowing what to do or where to find it, or what do you do if you can't afford something else and you're already tied to a lease. So there's lots of education that needs to be involved. I do think we need to work closely with Kansas State University, and this doesn't just impact students, it impacts our senior citizens, it impacts vulnerable populations. I was a single mom for a long time, and I struggled just to keep my house, but if I lost my house, I don't know what I would have done. But I do know I let go a lot of maintenance during that time because I just couldn't afford it. So I think these are things we need to look at a little bit closer, continue to have those discussions, look at how the projects are working in other communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Next up is Rich Jankovich.
Sorry for the bats. I've dealt with them, even here in a newer home, and they're no fun. But taking that aside, I was on the commission during the rental inspection issue. We looked at other ways when it was repealed to try and make it better. I worked with the SGA as they tried to formulate something. They were trying to go off of the Fort Collins model, which was about 290 pages long. I got them down to a point where we had a nice one-page document, and we started working together with the landlord association, which I think is very critical. and that began to move the bar to where the students felt non-threatened, and actually all renters would have felt non-threatened by calling code or now risk prevention, that would allow them to make that call when they did have an issue and it wasn't being solved. Our daughter-in-law was living in an apartment similar to that. Now, she happened to live in a unit that was carved, but the landlord was solid. And that's one of the dichotomies we have. We have really good actors and we have some okay actors and other non-actors. We also have the issue, the owner has to be notified of issues, but there's a property manager in between, and you noted one. And that's one of the difficulties and was the hope of that registration. So yeah, I'm in favor of trying to find a way to make sure that we're absolutely safe. It has to be cost effective to the city and the taxpayers and the renters, because they're taxpayers as well.
Thank you, Rich.
I'm not going to go point by point. I really don't have, there's not enough time in this video to go point by point of every single thing they said. I wish I could. I'll just say this. Ask yourself, how did housing in Manhattan become unsafe in the first place? These buildings in question, they were built a long time ago. These buildings weren't regularly inspected, and they've been allowed to decay for a long time without any kind of renovations or repairs. And I think it's pretty clear that these buildings, regardless, they're going to have to be inspected at some point. They need a lot of money for investment to make these repairs, to modernize these buildings. And it's going to have to be done at some point. Either these buildings need renovated or repairs done, or they're going to just need to be bulldozed down. So this isn't by any means something that's incredibly easy and just a quick fix. And it shouldn't be, because this is housing. There is no quick fix to unsafe housing conditions. I have a huge issue with the inspection program that we have now. And I don't like it when people say, well, we just need to educate people about the housing process so that they don't get into this. It would be a huge benefit to educate renters on the rental process. However, I don't think people really realize what goes into education. It takes a lot of time and money to educate renters. If this is our solution, just education, this is something that will never, ever, 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 ever change. It is a continual problem. If the idea or plan is to educate renters on housing safety and using that as a way to prevent unsafe housing in Manhattan, it is a fool's errand, as in it's something that will never, ever, ever, ever be accomplished. Year after year after year after year, have to be putting a lot of time and a lot of money into this. And it's something that doesn't guarantee everybody will be educated. Does everybody want to spend a couple hours out of their day to attend a class? The thing about this program we have now is that it allows housing to be unsafe in Manhattan. And it begs the question, why should we have unsafe housing in Manhattan, Kansas? Why should we allow that? Why should we allow buildings to decay to the point where they become dangerous for people to live in? Why do we allow people to rent out those places? Why do we allow people to sign a legally binding contract and then move all of their possessions, their pets, all their stuff into that house, and then count on those renters who probably don't have any kind of formal training or education on how to point out the little things in the house that may become a major issue in the future? One example that I'm going to keep bringing up is Sacramento, Texas. They implemented a mandatory rental inspection program because a lot of their housing, just like ours, it was old and it was decaying. And that housing had wiring and electrical circuits that were old and faulty. So what it ended up happening was renters rented that place out like normal, and they used it like normal. The faulty wiring caught the house on fire, and people died, and the house is gone.
A devastating fire in a rental property more than 8 years ago prompted the city to take immediate action. The fire, which resulted in lives lost, was caused because code violations went unnoticed.
I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody that we don't want this to happen here. There's a reason why we have inspectors in our society, and that is so they can make sure whatever they're inspecting is safe before a issue happens. So you can't allow people to get into an unsafe housing condition and then report it, because that thing already happened to them. You know, sometimes it's slow, like maybe there's mold and maybe they haven't had health problems yet or health issues. But when you have a bat, you know, and if you're not trained to identify the signs of a bat infestation, then one night, you know, one unlucky night when the bats decide to come out, you could get bit and get rabies. Your pet could get bit and get rabies. You could have guano over you and have some sort of reaction to it. Just this idea that, oh, well, we'll just report things as we go along. It isn't a guarantee of safety. It's if you report it, then we'll fix the issue. If you catch us, then we'll report the issue. I understand that, you know, having this mandatory inspection program, it's going to cause a lot of disruption, because there is housing in Manhattan that is unsafe and is probably in need of thousands of dollars of repair. How are we going to deal with the housing that needs investment, that isn't safe, that does not qualify for decent housing? No one with a property can escape inspections. You're going to have to do it at some point, and these issues are going to have to be faced at some point. Somebody's going to be left holding the bag. Another thing to mention is when you think about how these homes became unsafe in the first place, how does a optional inspection program ensure that we don't run into this problem in the future? I don't know. If you're going to put all this responsibility on renters and expect them to perform duties that a licensed housing inspector is supposed to do, well, how are they going to identify issues that are going to be larger issues in the future? If you construct a home out of good materials and it is designed and built to last generations, if it is inspected on a regular basis, you know, depending on the intervals of inspections, which should be dictated by a licensed housing inspector, because they know, not me, not the landlord, only those who are trained and have that formal education will know how frequently a property should be inspected. And if you do all that, if it's built properly, built to last, and it's inspected on a regular interval, that building's gonna last longer than you and me. It's going to house our great-great-grandchildren. And I don't know how an optional inspection program is going to achieve that. So really, it's this huge hump we got to get over. It's establishing this program, and then it's getting to that point where every single home in Manhattan is actually safe. It gets closer to what one would define as decent housing. Housing that is safe, that's guaranteed to not put your life on the line or put you in any kind of harm whatsoever. You know, every rental home or property is going to need to be inspected on just a regular basis. 3 to 6 years for Lawrence, and for Manhattan, it could be whatever a housing inspector decides it is. Who knows? It could be up to 10 years. So it's not like, and if they're getting regularly inspected, if repairs are being made on time when they need it to be, and renovations are being made when they need to be, we will never, ever, 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 ever run into this situation. Having an optional inspection program where we put it all on the renters to identify this stuff, we'll never ever have housing in Manhattan that's guaranteed to be safe. If we can just look at Lawrence, Kansas, it's a college town just like us in Kansas, and it has a mandatory licensing and inspection program in which that program ensures that every single home that is available to rent out, it doesn't matter where it is in the city, it doesn't matter how old the house is, every place is guaranteed to be safe. You're not going to have to worry about trying to move out and find new housing because it turns out your housing is unsafe. You don't have to look for a lawyer if you can afford one to try to get out of your lease. There's not all of this huge mess. And it's been going on for over 5 years. They've more than likely gone over that hump. And all they have, renters don't have to worry about unsafe housing. You just rent out a house. Landlords there, they know what's going on with their property. They have it regularly inspected. They know all potential issues and things that they might need to keep an eye on over the next few years. In short, having a home inspected before somebody signs on to a legally binding contract and moves in is just the right thing to do. if we want to keep people safe. Any building inspected on a regular basis is just the responsible thing to do. We need a timeline on this. We can't ignore unsafe buildings here in Manhattan. You know, ask yourself, what kind of Manhattan do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a Manhattan with unsafe housing that's falling apart and where there isn't a guarantee of safety? Where it's on you to identify everything that's going on in the house, everything in the walls, everything that's going on with the pipes, everything that's going on with the roof and the attic. Some places that tenants don't have access to. If you want people to come and live here, and if you want students and other people to stay here, well, why should I choose Manhattan instead of Lawrence? Lawrence guarantees their home's safe. And they do it in an affordable way. I'm going to post Lawrence's mandatory licensing and inspection program below, and you can check it out. It's all clearly laid out, and they've got frequently asked questions that landlords ask. So all the information's there, and it's clear that this is a program that's affordable. And it's been going on for almost for over half a decade, pretty close to a decade. If another major college town in Kansas can do it, I don't see why Manhattan can't do it. What this requires is it's a timeline. When are we going to have housing that's safe in Manhattan? When are they going to get repaired? It would be nice to have a timeline. Yes, it's always nice to have more discussions. If all possible, call up our neighbors in Lawrence. Call them up and say, hey, you guys solved unsafe housing in Lawrence. How'd you do it? What went well? What didn't go well? You know, what advice do you have for us implementing here in Manhattan? And then taking their plan, discussing it with the community here, and also discussing it with real licensed housing inspectors and saying, hey, what do we like about this bill? And what do we want to change? Do we want to make the intervals in between inspections a little bit longer and give people more, breathing room? Do we want to inspect for other things? This was shared to us at Renters Together. And as you could see, Renter contacted us about her car, and her windshield was destroyed by a tree branch during a storm. Most renters, they don't have garages or anything to store their cars underneath. So it got destroyed by a fallen branch, which needs to be inspected every once in a while, because giant tree branches can cause damage on cars, damage on property. Maybe you could even fall on a person one day. So things like inspecting trees is another great thing to be including in these conversations. I'm going to cover Kaleb just very briefly because his response was a lot like Mata's and Wynn's.
Next up is Kaleb James.
Thank you. No, I'm not in favor of mandatory rental inspections, and the reason is cost. And that cost is going to go down to the people who are renting, and a lot of the people who have issues with the places they're renting can't afford additional expenses anyway. And so when you run the numbers of between $300 to $500, depending on where you get it from, what all you're inspecting, and you break that out over an average college, 10-month lease, talking about $50 a month. Then you already have spend-heavy commissions and want to raise property taxes. Those costs are passed down again. So you're talking about an extra $100 a month out of people who already can't afford it. What I have proposed in the past and have tried to push for is for the front page of every lease to have the information, and it has to be signed by the landlord and the leasee for code enforcement, and on there to boldly state that no retaliation can be made if they contact code enforcement. And I think that's the way we need to go. It reduces the cost on the taxpayer, reduces the cost on the renter, and then it puts it up front on the lease to let them know that they have the backing of the city commission of the law, that if there is an issue that violates code, they can call and make that complaint without fear of reprisal. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaleb.
He did a very classic politician move. If you're a politician and you don't want to do something for somebody, let's say when somebody asks for safety or somebody asks you to improve their conditions, I don't know, any ask in general. And if you're a politician and you don't want them to have that thing, but you also want their vote, then what you would do is you would convince that person that the thing that would help them is actually really bad for them. And that's exactly what Kaleb did. Mandatory rental inspections save renters from a lot of time and work and worry and woe. I don't have to take time to compare houses to see, all right, these are the few affordable houses that I'd be interested in. Which one looks safer? Which one is less likely to harm me? And then if you're a renter who happens to be in a house that's unsafe and you can't live there anymore, well, now you have to find new housing. Not just any housing, housing that is actually available, housing that's within reasonable distance of work and school, housing that's affordable. Then you got to figure out how you're going to get all your stuff and move it over there. You got to take time off work, and you got to take time off school, which isn't really taking time off because the homework's still due and you still got to study for the exam. If you just do a blind Google search and you just type in housing inspector cost, well, of course, what's going to pop up is privatized businesses or firms of inspectors. And he phrases it like it's going to be something you need to pay every single month or every single year. And that's just not true. I don't think he or Mata or Wynn took a look at Lawrence's inspection program, and they didn't even mention it at all. And that's huge because Lawrence is a college town, just like us. It's in Kansas, just like us. And it looks like they've been experiencing the same issues as us. Lawrence, Kansas is the best model we have for dealing with this issue. How they've dealt with it, like mentioned before, is they have a mandatory license and inspection program. And they have all the prices listed out there. So either Mata, Wynn, and Kaleb are being very disingenuous because they don't want this thing, not because they're looking after renters. Or Lawrence is straight up lying and misleading their whole population by posting numbers that are misleading or just not true. And I don't think Lawrence is doing that. I think Kaleb and his crew just don't want this to happen. They just want to move on. They want our votes, but they just want to move on to stuff that's going to benefit them, that they care about. And you can't do that. If you were serious about renters, you would take a look at this issue and you would compare it to other cities like Lawrence who have taken on this issue and who have come up with a solution like mandatory housing inspections. If you take a look at Lawrence, it's very clear that Kaleb is lying about it being unaffordable and somehow bad for the renter. Like it's somehow too expensive for the renter. If you add up those costs like I did in the previous video, I don't have time. I need to wrap this up. It's about $92 just for the year that it's inspected. Only for that year. So if the housing is actually safe, it has no issues, you're looking at like 3 to 6 years in between inspections. $92 over 6 years and having that cost put on renters, that's nothing. That's pennies. I'd rather pay that than pay all of my security deposit and then, I don't know, maybe pay for hospital bills if these unsafe housing conditions have a huge impact on my health. Sure, I'll pay a couple pennies so that we don't have to go through the inconvenience of looking for new housing, trying to hire a lawyer, trying to move all my stuff out of my home into a new home. So saying that this is in any way bad for renters is absurd. Saying this is bad for landlords is absurd too. You're providing valuable information about their property to them. They can identify issues before they grow into major problems. It's a lot cheaper for a landlord to fix faulty electrical wiring in their homes than it is to pay for a brand new house or pay any kind of court bills if parents decide to take you to court because your home burned down and killed their children. So what do we know? We know inspections are inevitable and they're necessary. They're just a responsible thing to do. Ensuring that any building or bridge or whatever is safe before somebody uses it is the responsible thing to do. Especially if somebody's going to have to move all of their stuff, all their personal belongings, and put their lives at risk and have to sign a legally binding contract. If somebody tries to convince you that safety is bad for you or something that would guarantee safety or guarantee you would have a decent standard of living and try to convince you that that's a bad thing, that you don't want that, that's a huge red flag. And don't vote for those people. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'll tell you not to vote for. Don't vote for somebody who's clearly lying to you or thinks that you're stupid and that you can't go on Google yourself and look up a citywide inspection program and how much it costs. The information's all there. I'm posting it in the link below. So go check it out for yourselves. I hope we can get some strong candidates for housing, because if you want Manhattan to thrive, you have to ensure they have adequate housing. And that's housing that is safe, that is housing that is affordable for them, that is housing that is secure, where they're not afraid that they're going to have to move out soon or random time, or are very unsure like how long they're going to have to live there, or if they're going to have to move, or, you know, what kind of craziness is ahead of them. Yeah, I hope we can get some strong candidates on housing, because this affordable housing or workforce housing or whatever you want to call it, it's going to be improvement on housing in Manhattan regardless, because that's going to be huge.